I was thinking about what would be a story cross-culturally that has everything that you would ever want to know about relationship that I could tell, and would also have the shadow side of relationship, because any unclaimed part of ourself or a part of ourself that we've judged in any way is always knocking at the door. So I found a story that's found in every culture of the world. That's everything we need to know about relationship, around connection and spaciousness. And I thought I'd end this little rift with this story, and then we could break up into groups and really talk about what you related to the story, and also the three processes of self, other, and collective, and the 4 ways we can track to see if we're still alive, what's inspiring me, what's challenging me, what's surprising me, what's touching and moving me, so that I'm not walking the procession of the living dead. So this story is about the Knights of the Round Table. And the Knights of the Round Table had been living in this forest for a long time in a nice little village and community and doing really good work. But they had decided that they really needed to do some deeper work, and they needed to work just with the 12 of them. And they knew there was a forest that only one person lived in, and they thought that would be the perfect forest that they could work in together and go deeper. For 6 months, they needed to do some really quality, deep work. And so Arthur thought, well, I'll just go in and negotiate with this man in the forest, this king of the forest. So he went in and he said to the king of the forest, we thought there would be a really nice exchange. We've been in the village for a long time and we need some quiet time, and you've had a lot of quiet time for years, and maybe you would like to be in the village. And the king of the forest said, no way. No way. I like the quiet here. I like the animals and the birds, and I like nature's rhythm. No way. And so Arthur said, well, is there anything that we could do or find for you that would even tempt you to leave the forest and exchange forest? And the king of the forest said, well, there's been this one question that I've been thinking about for years, but I've never found the right answer to. And maybe if you found the right answer to it, I'd think about leaving the forest and going over to that small village you've been taking care of. And so Arthur said, well, what's the question? And he said, well, it's not only the question, you have to have the right answer, and you have to the right answer in 7 days, or it's not a deal. And, well, Arthur said, I need to know the question before I can make an agreement about whether I can do it in 7 days or not. And he said, not only is 7 days, but if it's not the right answer, Arthur, it's your life. And Arthur thought to himself, pretty heavy terms. This must be a big question. And so he said, well, what's the question? And the king of the forest said, the question is, what does woman want? And Arthur thought about it. He'd been married to Guinevere all these years, and he still didn't know. He thought that's a pretty good question. And he said, is that the question that you're really serious about? And he said, yes, that's the question I want the right answer to. What does woman want? And Arthur thought to himself, well, in 7 days, they could do a survey of all the ladies in the land. That was doable. Yeah, heavy terms, be my life is not the right answer, but it's doable. We could do a survey of the ladies in the land for 7 days and be back here at 7 days. He says, you got a deal. So he goes out of the forest, and who does he run into but his most handsomest of knights, Gwain, and his most creative of knights. And he tells Gwain, look, we have a deal. but we've got to do a survey of all the ladies in the land in 7 days. And Gwain said, well, allow me to do a survey of the ladies in the land. And Arthur thought, well, that's not such a bad idea. After all, he's my most handsomest of knights, and he's my most creative of knights, and if anyone could get the right answers, it would be Gwain, because he's one of those cool dude types, you know, the hunk variety type. And so Gwain went off and began to do a survey of all the ladies in the land. And about the 4th day into the survey, Gwain himself decided that he'd just take a little pause in the meadow and think about, because there had been 3 reoccurring themes that all the ladies in the land were saying about what they really wanted. And they were all congruent, and some of them gave him pause, that he thought, well, his relationships would certainly be different now that he knew this consistent information, but he had 3 more days to go. So he decided he'd just take a little rest in the meadow, and he was lying down on his back in the meadow and looking at the clouds, and had his horse there, and he heard a horse approaching, and the horse stopped, and then he sat up, and somebody had gotten off the horse, and it was a beautifully bridled horse, and he looked, and all he could see was this long skirt, little feet. What did he see? Long skirt and little feet. And what did he see? This long skirt and little feet beginning to move around the horse. And what did he see? Long skirt and little feet. And there, coming around the horse, he thought, well, he was prepared to ask another fair damsel, you know, what would she want? What did she really want in relationship? And there, standing before him, was the ugliest woman he'd ever seen in his whole life. He had never seen such a grotesque-looking woman in his whole entire life. In fact, he had to take a couple of steps back. I mean, he had a new definition of ugly. This was it, ugly. I mean, she had natty, greasy hair and flies kind of hovercrafting around her head. And she had big red boils on her cheeks and a wart on her nose. And when she smiled, you know, her teeth were yellow and craggy, and she had hair that kind of curled around her chin. And he said, she's just ugly. And he thought, he couldn't even look at her, and he said, good day. He said, I'm Knight Gwain, and I'm a Knight of the Round Table. And I'm doing a survey of all the ladies in the land, and I was wondering if you could just give me your worthy answer, and then we could both be gone on our ways. She was really ugly. You just couldn't even look at her. I mean, peripheral vision began to expand. And she said, my name is Lady Ragwell, and I have the only answer that will give you the forest and save your king's life. And that got Gawain's attention. How did she know the terms? The forest and his king's life. And he said, well, let me just run by these 3 themes because I'm sure yours will fit. And she said, I have the only answer that will work. But let me hear what you found so far. And he said, well, the first thing that woman wants is woman wants to be respected and honored for who she is. And Lady Ragwell, she got all soft and dreamy-eyed. And she said, male or female, who doesn't want to be honored and respected for who they are? But that's not the right answer. And he went on and he said, well, the second answer then must be it. What woman wants is woman wants to have a sense of family and a sense of home and a sense of being protected and provided for. And Lady Ragwell again got all soft and dreamy-eyed. And she said very softly, male or female, who doesn't want to be protected and provided for and to have a sense of home and sense of family. And unfortunately, that's not the right answer. And he said, well, the last one certainly must be it, because all the ladies in the land so far have said this. All the ladies in the land want to have sweet nothings and affection and love spoken to them. And this time she became very soft and very dreamy-eyed, still ugly. Still ugly, but very soft and dreamy-eyed, and said, male or female, we all want to be loved and desired and spoken sweet nothings to. And regrettably, that's not the right answer. And Gwain was stunned. And he said, well then, what is your worthy answer? And she said, not until we strike a deal. After all, your king's life will be saved, and you will get the forest, but I must get something too. And my terms are these, that 48 hours after you return, you and I shall be married. And Gwain has got this sickening kind of look. She was what? Ugly. Really ugly. And he was going to be married to the ugliest woman that he's ever seen in his entire life. She was the ugliest woman in the whole kingdom. I mean, really disgustingly ugly. And he said, okay, if this answer works, the other answers, have greater odds, I'll give you my knightly word, I'll include it, and I give you my knightly word that we'll, she said, say it. we'll get, say it. Married, we'll get married 48 hours, and I'll have a castle, and we'll get married, if it's the right answer. And so he said, what is the answer? And she said, what woman wants, and also, most of all, what woman wants, but also men want this too, woman wants to have her way. That's the right answer. And that's the only answer that's going to work. And Gwain thought about it for a moment, and it certainly had been his experience. But, he thought, what really will work is the answer about being loved and desired and spoken sweet nothing. So he thought he was still on the safe ballpark. So he said, well, thank you very much, and I'll make sure that's included with the rest of the answers. I give you my knightly word. And they bid each other adieu and said goodbye. And he continued the survey of all the ladies in the land. And 7 days later, he met Arthur at the edge of the forest and told him the 4 answers. And Arthur said, oh, these are great. These are great. And Gwain said, these are the 3 ones that every woman has said consistently, but this is one. I gave my knightly word. I gave my knightly word that it be included, so it has to be included. And so Arthur said, well, one of these are all great. One of these will definitely work. So he went into the forest and he met with the king, and the king said, well, Arthur, today's the day you have the forest, you have your life, or today's the day I have my forest, and it's the end of your life. What have you found? And Arthur said, Sir, what woman wants is that woman wants to be honored and respected for who she is. And Arthur, the king of the forest himself, got all soft and dreamy-eyed, and he said, My, he said, that's a worthy answer. Fine answer. Best answer I've heard for a long time, but unfortunately not the right answer. And Arthur went on to say, sir, what woman wants is woman wants to have a sense of home, a sense of family, a sense of being provided for. And again, the king got all soft and dreamy-eyed himself and said again, oh, fine answer, worthy answer, impeccable answer, but regrettably not the right answer. And Arthur thought to himself, well, 2 down, 2 to go. He said, sir, what woman wants is she wants to be loved and desired and spoken sweet nothings to. And this time, the king of the forest touched his heart and got all soft and dreamy-eyed and said, oh, yes, who doesn't want to be loved and desired and spoken sweet nothings to? But regrettably, one of the finest and most worthy answers I've heard, but not the right answer. So this time Arthur gulped and he said, sir, this is not a consensus answer of all the ladies in the land. But, sir, my knight has given his knightly word that it be included, sir. And this is the last answer, sir. What woman wants, sir, woman wants to have her way. And the king of the forest narrowed his eyes and stood up and looked at Arthur and said, you have been talking to my sister. The forest is yours. And he stormed out of the forest. And Arthur was so relieved. He was so relieved, and he went out of the forest and he pounded on Gwain and he said, we did it, we did it, we did it. And Gwain said, sir, which answer, sir? Sir, which answer, sir? And Gwain said, sir, sir, please tell me which answer. I've given my knightly word to one of these. And Arthur said, well, the one that woman wants to have her way. And Gwain said, really? That's the answer? Sir, I have to marry that woman in 48 hours. I gave my knightly word. And he said, well, of course you should marry that woman. Who was that woman that saved my life and also gave us our forest? Of course you must marry her, of course. And who is this woman? And he said, sir, it's Lady Ragwell, sir. And this time it was Arthur's turn to pale. And he said, do not tell me you gave your knightly word to the ugliest woman in the kingdom. And he said, sir, I did, sir. She's the one that gave me the answer, sir. And I have to get a castle, sir, and we have to get married in 48 hours, sir. And poor Arthur, he went home and he told Guinevere, and Guinevere said, but can't it be a small wedding? But being the knights they were, they found the castle. And being the knights they were, they made sure that the way to the castle and the marriage feast was lined with garlands of flowers and big archways in which Lady Ragwell could ride under and wave to the crowds. And so sure enough, 48 hours later, Lady Ragwell on her horse was waving to the crowds and waving to the knights. And they could barely look up and wave back because she was so ugly. She had this natty, greasy hair, and these flies that hovercrafted around, and these big red boils on her cheek, and a wart on her nose, and yellow, craggy teeth, and hair that curled around her chin, and she was so ugly. She just reeked. She just smelled foul. And they went to the marriage feast, and they got through the marriage feast, and they were eating, and she would eat the turkey drumsticks, and flicks of turkey would go up into her hair, and grease went all over her face, and And everyone just couldn't look at her. They just couldn't look at her. They were so grossed out. And it was a long day for Gwain. And finally, the feast was over. And he took her inside the castle and closed the door. And he was so relieved that it was over. And she said, "Now, Gwain, now you must kiss me. And I'm entitled to marriage privileges, and you must take me to bed." And Gwain thought to himself, it's been a very long day. Very long day. But being the knight that he was, he kind of mustered himself up. And he looked at this hairy, red-boiled cheek, and he just kind of closed his eyes, and he just leaned over and kissed her. And then he opened his eyes, and there standing before him was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his entire life. And he thought, oh, it has been a long day. I'm just totally hallucinating it. And she said, "That's right, Gwain, one half of the spell has been broken. And now you get to choose. Which part of the day do you want me ugly in? And which part of the day you want me beautiful in?" And he thought, I'm just going to sit down for this one. So he sat down on a stone bench in the castle. And he thought, well, if she was ugly during the day, night could be rather interesting. But if she was beautiful during the day, everyone wouldn't be so depressed about his plight. But night could be rather difficult. And he went back and forth, and finally he said, you know, this is going to affect you more than it's going to affect me. And so why don't you choose which part of the day you want to be beautiful in and which part of the day you want to be ugly in. And the other half of the spell was broken because she got to choose to have what part of the day she had the power of choice again, to have her way. And it's said that they lived very happily ever after in that castle. But it's also said that in that castle is where that old saying comes from. Remember the journey first, and relationships will fall into place. What was that old saying? Remember the journey first, and relationships will fall into place. Because male or female, we all want to be honored and respected for who we are. Male or female, we all want to be protected and provided for and have a sense of home or family. Male or female, we all want to be loved and desired and spoken sweet nothings to. And male or female, we don't want to have our choice taken away from us. Male or female, we want to have the power to choose and not have our choice taken away, so that we can learn to learn to choose, and learn to relate. Remember the journey first, and relationships will fall into place. Remember the journey first, and relationships will fall into place. And there's always a Lady Ragwell in each one of us, whether we're male or female, the parts of ourselves that we deem ugly or undesirable. But it's our integrity who will always look beyond appearances. And he kept his knightly word. And he kept his knightly word. And it said that they lived well and they died well. And it said that they lived well and they died well because they remembered the journey first, and relationships will fall into place. So that's a good place for us to take a little pause and just see where you are and what's been stirred this morning, because a lot's been stirred.